Warning, the following video may contain sequences which some viewers may find disturbing. Viewer discretion is advised.
I want to start this one off with a question. Really think about this now. Should a mentally unstable person be held accountable for their actions? I mean, logically, someone who is mentally unstable wouldn't necessarily have a proper moral compass as to what is acceptable and what isn't acceptable. But at the same time, someone who is mentally unstable wouldn't necessarily lack the knowledge of right and wrong. Maybe the answer to that question would have to depend on whatever situation I'd be referring to then. Okay, well, what if someone planned out a crime, waited until the right time, then committed said crime? Would he be accountable? Most people would say obviously if someone committed a crime that they planned out, then yeah, he should be held accountable. Well again, what if that person was mentally unstable? Does that rule go out the window just because he lacked a moral compass as to what's right and what's wrong? Let's give a scenario. If a child, maybe around 5 years old, grabbed a gun belonging to his father and shot his mother in her sleep because she scolded him for leaving his toys all over the floor, should the child be held accountable for that? His mental capacity is clearly underdeveloped, so should he be blamed? Maybe a better question would be, does it make the crime any less horrific? Does it bring back the person that was killed? Does saying he was mentally unstable make it all better? I want you to think about these things in our case today. Our case isn't about a child shooting his mother, no, it's about a young man, a YouTuber actually. Randy Stair, also known by his internet persona Andrew Blaze. His mental decline was clearly seen in his videos leading up to his horrific crime. What was the crime? Well, this YouTuber turned into a mass murderer, brutally killing his coworkers from his night job, right before killing himself. Before we go into the crime in question, let's take a look at the events leading up to this. You see, Randy's progression was almost documented in his actions. He kept going from bad to worse, and the changes with his personality and mannerisms were plainly seen. But sadly, nothing was done. Anyways, if we go back to Randy's childhood, it definitely wasn't ideal. He was bullied a lot. In fact, according to him, his bullying spanned from his middle school years all the way through to his high school years. He also developed a deep hatred for his father. We can't be sure if this is why his mental health started to decline, but it obviously didn't help. Actually, it was around this time signs of his declining mental health became apparent. He became fascinated with death. During his English classes, whenever he wrote an essay, his main characters would always inevitably get involved in some sort of deadly situation, and eventually die by the end of the story. That in itself isn't necessarily bad, but think of his age. Could you imagine as a teacher, one of your 10-year-old students constantly coming up with tragic stories? I would imagine one would question why was that his default option. But again, his actions were never really questioned. Randy started to become obsessed with death and the afterlife. His obsession only worsened throughout middle school, and by the time he hit high school he was already contemplating methods of suicide. Burning. In fact, he mentioned that on a trip to New York with his family during his high school days, he thought about jumping from one of the skyscrapers to commit suicide. When he spoke about this story years later, he then expressed regret for not going through with it. You'd think that with all of these issues one would think that going to see a counselor or therapist would be a good course of action. However, Randy strongly opposed that idea. He stated that he believes going to such sessions alter who you are. And technically he's right, but isn't that the point? That you change from being someone who's depressed and suicidal to someone who is not and can function in day-to-day life. Like it or not, sometimes an entire lifestyle change is necessary to help you feel better about yourself. However, let's not get off topic. When Randy was 15, he started his first YouTube channel called PioneersProductions. He had many over the course of his online activity, but PioneersProductions was where it all began. This channel was originally a parody channel, similar to the popular channel Smosh when they began. His videos featured a lot of fictional characters. Two of his most used characters, however, were Froggy and Whale. A lot of the videos from that channel have been deleted, but overall you could tell that the channel was just a fun comedy channel. However, as stated earlier, his mental health was declining, and it was seen throughout his videos as his content became darker. One of these videos was one called Somber, which just showed Randy throwing rocks into a lake, walking around and carving his initials and what seemed to be the date onto a rock. The video had no talking, just a very calming soundtrack in the background. Pretty cryptic stuff. His mental health did not stop there, however. At some point he started to idolize the Columbine high school shooters, to the point where he stated that Weiss Markets, his place of employment at the time, was officially Columbine High School, foreshadowing the events that would soon become a reality. He was also obsessed with Ember McLean, who was a villain from the show Danny Phantom. As to the reason why, it's hard to say. Maybe he empathized with her because of her backstory. In the show, Ember was an unpopular high schooler who wanted to be a rock star when she grew up. One day someone asked her out to the movies. As an unpopular girl, that immediately became something she was looking forward to. However, the guy never showed up. She ended up waiting all night and into the morning for him, but he never came. When she finally came to terms with being stood up, she returned home and just fell asleep, probably from feeling sad and emotionally drained. She slept and slept until something woke her up. A fire. Her house had somehow caught ablaze with her inside, and sadly she wasn't able to get out, causing her death, thus making her into a ghost. It's possible that he empathized with the feelings she felt since, like Ember, Randy was also unpopular. But it could also be something else. Randy believed he was a woman trapped within a man's body, meaning he was a transsexual. He stated that he would often cross-dress when home alone, and also he did like his girly appearance. So it could be again that he put himself in her shoes and empathized with her story. Ironically, however, it is said that he was openly homophobic. Also, do you see a connection there? A character he idolized was called Ember McLean, and she died in a fire. And his online persona was Andrew Blaze. Almost as if he was trying to emulate her in his own little way. Just thought I would mention it. It was his love for this character that eventually drove him to create another channel called Ember's Ghost Squad, which featured Ember, along with a group of other people. Which is where the Andrew Blaze persona comes in. Interestingly, a character he created for this group was called Mackenzie West, and she was, in his words, his soulmate. It should also be mentioned that the backstories for these characters he created are pretty gruesome and disturbing. It completely lines up with what was stated about his stories in his school days, with his characters always ending up in some sort of lethal situation, resulting in their deaths. His mental state was in complete disarray at this point. In the last videos he posted to his channels, it became abundantly clear. With the last video for Ember's Ghost Squad being Andrew Blaze and another member, Rachel Shadows, shooting up a school, which was also in that character's backstory. And for PioneersProductions, a video with him being raped, another with him killing two of his main characters. Honestly, it was just a mess. Some of you might be wondering how we know all of this, since as stated in the beginning, Randy killed himself after his crimes. We know all of this because Randy documented it. Before he committed the mass shooting, he left links to his journals and videos uploaded to his Mediafire profile, which have since been deleted for obvious reasons. Okay, now that we've seen what led up to his bloodbath, let's look at what he did in more detail. Something interesting to note is that he didn't exactly know if he would have shot up his workplace or not. He was certain that he would commit suicide, however, not if he would commit mass murder in the process. In one of the videos he left behind, he decided, by a coin flip. Yes, a literal coin flip. He decided his own fate and the fates of his victims through a simple game of chance. If it was heads, he would kill himself at his home, but if tails, at the supermarket that he worked. I think we all know what it landed on. Leading up to the evening, he left a number of cryptic messages throughout his profiles, including the final Ember's Ghost Squad video that I mentioned earlier. I do have a few ideas on why he wasn't taken seriously, but let's leave that for the end. On June 7, 2017, at around 11 p.m. he arrived for his overnight shift at Y's supermarket, which he had been doing for years. There were 4 with him there that night: Terry Sterling, Victoria Brown, Brian Haynes, and Kristen Newell. He did his regular duties like he would do any other night. Things seemed normal to all his co-workers. During this, however, Randy was tweeting, and everything he said just foreshadowed what he was about to do. He also started sending the links I mentioned earlier, of the videos that he's been making for years, which just documented his mental decline every step of the way. Then, while his coworkers were busy with their duties, he barricaded the doors. After which, he went to his car and sent a text to his mother, who unfortunately was asleep and did not see it. The text let her know about his video journal, also what he wanted her to do with his remains. After, he put on black lipstick and eyeliner, possibly to emulate his idol Ember McLean, then puts on a shirt which had the words, "It's time to rise," on it. This shirt is significant because it is what his persona Andrew Blaze wore in the last video he posted to the Ember's Ghost Squad channel, the school shooting video. He grabs a bag which had 2 shotguns and ammo, and returns to the supermarket. The first person he found was Victoria, and he shot her twice. Kristen was there, however she had her headphones on and the sounds of the gunshots were muffled. By the time she realized what was happening and she turned around, Randy was over Victoria's body, and he shot her 2 more times. She states that she made eye contact with him for a short time, but she was too scared to do anything, even move. Randy, however, for some reason left her alone. He went over to the next aisle and shot Terry twice in the back. Then moved to the bakery section where Brian was, and he shoots him 5 times. During all this, Kristen, who was spared, went over to Victoria's body and realized she still had a heartbeat, so she called 911. After that, she stealthily made her way out of the store and hid. Randy had probably realized that Kristen had escaped, so with everyone else down, he just started shooting at everything he could randomly. He tried shooting propane tanks which he thought would explode, but they didn't. Contrary to popular belief, shooting a propane tank or something with gas in general wouldn't explode ordinarily. Can it happen? Yes, but the chances are not high. For that to happen, you need air and a spark. More often than not, by the time air is introduced when a propane tank is shot, the spark caused by the bullet either didn't happen or is already gone. It is possible, but not probable. Anyways, after he did that, and he was satisfied with the destruction he caused, he went back to the bakery section, then shot himself. Truly an unfortunate end to Randy's and his 3 victims' lives. Many people would say that why wasn't he stopped? Couldn't people tell he needed help? Well, yes and no. Randy was disturbed, yes, but with the image he portrayed online, especially with the characters he created. If he tweeted something that was particularly disturbing using one of those characters, it would be easy for a fan to consider it something that the character is saying, and it's not an accurate representation of how Randy truly feels. Think about it. His characters were basically vengeful ghosts who died horrific deaths, and they were very edgy and would say and do depressive things. It wouldn't be out of their character to say something disturbing. Hell, with some of these backstories, I can understand why they would be vengeful. But besides that, really, what could anyone that wasn't in Randy's life do? Even if you decide to tell him to get help or say kind words to try and help him understand, to him, you'd just be some person on the internet. In all honesty, why would he listen to some stranger telling him to go to see a therapist, which he already stated that he is opposed to doing? Can you honestly tell me that if you, for example, hate carrots, and some stranger told you to go eat a carrot, it's good for your eyes, that you would just say, okay, and go eat one? I'm sure most if not all would say no. The next question after this would probably be, well, why didn't his family help him? Randy had a complicated relationship with them from what it seemed. As stated earlier, he hated his father. Besides that, from what we can see from Randy's personality, it was far too late to do anything to him when he was an adult. A change would have needed to happen when he was still growing up. Unfortunately, that did not happen. But that isn't uncommon either. Typically, once a child becomes a teenager, they get a sort of rebellious stage. In that stage, a lot of times, the teen wouldn't view their parents as a person to get emotional support from, and that was probably the case with Randy. But also, like it or not, some people genuinely cannot be helped. Some people, once they get a certain mindset or reach a certain conclusion, they just stick to it until the grave. Maybe Randy Stair was one of those people. It's always sad to see when someone who was mentally unstable goes down a route like this. What he did was horrible. He was mentally ill, yes, but he was still in complete control of his actions. Randy knew what he was doing. He idolized school shooters. He continued feeding his desire to commit a form of mass murder. His skits proved it. Whether he could have been helped or not, we will never know, but what we do know is, because of him, 3 people lost their lives that night in 2017. One of which left behind a child, who now has to grow up without their mother. Now, I would never say someone is deserving of death. That is not my decision to make. That is not my sentence or verdict to dish out. I will, however, say that just because he was mentally ill, it does not change the fact that what he did was horrible. He was in complete control of his actions. He chose to do what he did. He chose to kill others when he took his own life. He planned it. And he executed that plan. Again, it's a very unfortunate situation. Things could have been done to help Randy had those closest to him maybe saw the signs earlier, but really it's something that often happens to parents eventually. Randy himself shouldn't have involved the innocent in his suicide. But he did, and whether he was mentally ill or not, he will always be in the wrong for that. We can only hope that his 3 victims rest in peace, and in the end got well. I suppose Randy did get what he wanted, didn't he? So, what do you think? He was mentally ill. Should Randy Stair be held accountable for his actions? Or is the blame on something else? I'll let you decide.